Let's jump right into it. Welcome to today's Explainer, where we're going to unpack a deeply psychological and just incredibly moving story called The White Silence, a Japanese novel of loneliness. We usually think of apocalyptic events as loud, chaotic, and completely destructive, right? But what if the end of the world didn't actually come with a massive bang, but instead with a polite bow? Today, we're exploring a seriously chilling thought experiment that peels back the layers of societal norms to expose this profound isolation that can just hide right in plain sight. So imagine this for a second. What would happen if a mysterious epidemic of white blindness just suddenly appeared in modern Japan? This is the inciting premise here, and it really sets up this creeping psychological dread that runs through the whole narrative. It's actually a direct response to José Saramago's famous novel Blindness, but instead of asking what happens to humanity when civilization completely breaks down, this story asks a much quieter and honestly maybe a much more terrifying question. What happens when an inexplicable epidemic strikes and society literally refuses to panic? The contrast is absolutely stark. In Saramago's Blindness, that sudden loss of sight strips away all social order. It brings out the fear, the desperation, the literal monsters hiding within people when the rules vanish. But in The White Silence, the rules don't vanish. The trains just keep running exactly on schedule. People stay in perfectly orderly lines. Neighbors are still bowing to each other. It creates this eerie, suffocating perfection where society looks entirely calm and disciplined, totally masking a silent tragedy playing out underneath. To really grasp this, we have to look at the physical phenomenon of the blindness itself. It's not a sudden descent into pitch-black darkness. Instead, this white blindness is an unexplained epidemic where a person's vision is completely replaced by an endless, bright, snowy light. One of the characters, a salaryman named Kenji, describes it as basically standing inside pure light, with absolutely no walls and no edges, just a clean, endless void that totally erases the world. And as this condition spreads, the societal symptoms are fascinating, but also just completely heartbreaking. Nobody screams. When it hits a school, the children immediately form neat little lines, umbrellas open simultaneously in the rain, and most hauntingly of all, everyone immediately just says, "I'm sorry." These incredibly polite symptoms hide a massive emergency. People are so deeply conditioned to maintain harmony that their literal first instinct upon going blind is to apologize for being an inconvenience. Part 1. The illusion of order. The crucial takeaway here is that courtesy can so easily become distance. In a culture deeply rooted in anticipating the needs of the group, basic consideration for others can seamlessly mutate into a profound, paralyzing fear of asking for help. The dignity of keeping up appearances actually ends up building invisible, impenetrable walls between people. I do not want to trouble anyone. This single phrase is arguably the most dangerous element in this entire story. It sounds kind, right? It sounds dignified, and it sounds loving. But in the world of The White Silence, this is so often the final sentence someone speaks before they simply disappear alone into their room. It's the ultimate mask for pure desperation. We see how this builds in a very practical, real-world way with Kenji, the dedicated salaryman we mentioned earlier. He loses his sight, but absolutely refuses to stop working. So he memorizes the exactly 32 steps to his desk. He deliberately hides his accessibility software so the younger colleagues won't worry about him. And then he just blindly clicks through computer screens to approve shipping logistics. This ultimately causes a massive highway accident involving unstable industrial chemicals. And all of this destruction happens simply because he couldn't bear the thought of becoming a burden. The climax of Kenji's arc gives us this profound moment with his manager, Mr. Hayashi. After the accident, Hayashi doesn't yell at him. Instead, he just tells Kenji, "Your mistake was not trusting others to see what you could not." It's a huge realization for Kenji. He learns that true strength isn't suffering in perfect silence. Strength is actually allowing other people to carry a piece of your life when you stumble. Part 2. Tragedies of Unspoken Needs. This brings us to a really heartbreaking vignette about Mr. Ishida, the room no one entered. Mr. Ishida was this incredibly polite, quiet neighbor in his apartment building. Because of that, everyone just assumed he valued his privacy, and everyone assumed somebody else was checking on him. So they all just stayed away. And tragically, he passed away completely alone, his death going unnoticed for days, surrounded by neighbors who literally heard him coughing through the walls, but were just too embarrassed to intrude. When a nurse named Aiko eventually enters Mr. Ishida's apartment, she finds his charged mobile phone. On it is a draft message that he never actually hit send on. It just read, "I hope this isn't inconvenient, but..." He had dozens of these unsent drafts just begging for help, asking for groceries, admitting he was lonely. He literally died from the sheer, overwhelming fear of being an inconvenience to the people around him. We also see a totally different kind of quiet tragedy. Daichi is a really loving son, but he lives his whole life in tomorrow. Every single Sunday, he finds a perfectly reasonable excuse not to visit his mother, Mrs. Fujimoto. It's next week, or a business trip, or he's too tired. And his mother just crosses these off her calendar, one by one, never complaining. Until one day, it is simply too late, and she passes away before he ever makes it there. When Daichi finally does arrive way too late, he finds a drawer completely full of unmailed birthday cards and a final note from his mother containing this incredible realization: love travels farther than regret. She doesn't blame him at all. Instead, she's warning him against living his life in tomorrow. It just perfectly highlights the absolute danger of letting your good intentions replace your actual presence. Part 3. The courage to ask. So how does this end? Well, the suffocating spell of all this hyper-politeness is finally broken with one incredibly simple question. An elderly carpenter is standing outside a community shelter holding these two heavy boards, and instead of struggling silently like everyone else has been doing, he just asks, "Could someone help me?" Instantly, 3 teenagers rush right over to help him. The sky doesn't fall, his dignity isn't ruined. In fact, it actually makes the teenagers feel useful and valued. That one simple question breaks the dam. A massive shift washes over the entire city after this. The old habit was a reflexive, isolating apology. Just, "I'm sorry," full stop. But the new habit evolves into this genuine connection. "I'm sorry, could you help me?" The deep cultural reflex of apologizing doesn't completely disappear, but it's transformed. It becomes a bridge, finally giving people the permission to need one another. The crucial point of this whole transformation is summed up beautifully by 2 middle school students in the story, Haru and Mei. They realize that real kindness is making it safe for someone to ask. It's an active, participatory environment where vulnerability is met with immediate, absolutely judgment-free support. The way this story navigates through total isolation to finally find connection is just a masterful exploration of the human spirit. I highly recommend you experience this haunting journey yourself. And I do want to please mention, for full imaginary talks, visit https://imaginarytalks.com/The White Silence, a Japanese novel of loneliness, to dive even deeper into these incredible characters. We've explored how a society can function perfectly on the surface while its people quietly disappear from one another. And we've seen how the very simple act of asking for help can literally save us. So I want to leave you with a pretty stark question to think about. Who are you waiting to call? Because as this explainer clearly shows us, love kept purely inside our intentions eventually just becomes invisible. Don't let your connections wait for a tomorrow that might not come. Thanks so much for exploring this with me today.